I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this. I always assumed if cheating ever happened to me, I'd see it coming. That I'd recognize the signs, trust my instincts, and handle it before it got out of control. But that's the thing about betrayal, it blindsides you, no matter how much you think you're prepared. My name is Daniel, and I'm 35. I work as a project manager for a construction firm, a job I actually enjoy despite the stress that comes with it. I've always been the kind of guy who values stability. I grew up in a pretty normal household, nothing fancy, but my parents loved each other, and I always thought that's what marriage was supposed to be. A partnership. A team. That's what I thought I had with my wife, Julia. We met 9 years ago at a friend's wedding. She was the life of the party, outgoing, laughing, making friends with everyone. I was the opposite. More reserved, more of an observer. But something about her pulled me in, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. We dated for 3 years before getting married, and I really believed we were happy. For a while, everything was great. We traveled, we built a life together, we talked about starting a family. She worked as a restaurant manager, and she loved the fast-paced environment, the socializing, the energy. I never had a problem with it. I liked that she had her own thing, that she was passionate about her work, but over the last few months, something started to shift. Julia became distant. She was always on her phone, always distracted. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying work had been hectic, that they were short-staffed, that she was picking up extra shifts. At first, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife. But then, the late nights started. The extra hours. The last-minute plans with co-workers that she conveniently forgot to tell me about. The smell of perfume that wasn't hers, the way she suddenly became overly protective of her phone. I felt something in my gut, that quiet, nagging feeling that something wasn't right, but I pushed it down. Because I didn't want to believe it, not yet that I wanted to believe Julia. I really did. But when someone starts acting different, when they start changing in ways that don't make sense, it's hard to ignore. At first, I told myself I was just overthinking it. That maybe I was being insecure, or paranoid, or reading too much into things. But when I looked back at our relationship, when I really thought about the past few months, I couldn't ignore the obvious anymore. Something was wrong. It started with little things. She was always on her phone. Now, Julia had always been active on social media, always texting friends, but this was different. She'd angle the screen away from me, get irritated if I walked too close while she was typing. I even caught her smiling at her phone a few times, that kind of smirk you get when you're reading something you're really enjoying. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd sigh, roll her eyes, and say something like, "Just work stuff, Danny, relax." Then came the excuses. She started working later. A lot later. Before, her shifts at the restaurant were pretty consistent, afternoons into the evening, home by midnight at the latest. But suddenly, there were staffing issues. The restaurant was busier than ever. The manager needed her to stay and help close. First, I bought it. It made sense. The restaurant business is unpredictable, and Julia was always the type to step up when things got crazy. But then I started noticing patterns. She'd come home buzzing, not tired, not drained from work, but energized. Her makeup would still look fresh, her hair still perfectly in place. Some nights, she'd smell like a different perfume, one that wasn't hers. And the biggest red flag? She'd immediately shower as soon as she got home. I ignored it for as long as I could. But then, I started connecting the dots. One night, she came home late, really late. Past 2 a.m. I was still awake, pretending to be asleep when I heard her stumble through the door. She was giggling softly, trying to be quiet, but I could hear her. I could hear the way she fumbled with her keys, the way she whispered something under her breath before walking in. I sat up in bed, watching as she tiptoed through the bedroom, peeling off her jacket, checking her phone one last time before placing it on silent, and that's when I saw it. A notification popped up. A text message from Nick. Nick wasn't someone I knew. And the message? Just one word, tonight. My stomach dropped that I didn't say anything that night. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, or maybe because I needed more proof. I needed to be absolutely sure before I confronted her. So the next day, I started paying closer attention. Julia had always been unpredictable, but now, she was careful. She kept her phone on her at all times, never leaving it on the table, never letting me near it. She changed her password, something she had never done before. And the way she acted around me? It was like she had already checked out. That we used to laugh together. Watch movies, joke around, cuddle on the couch. But now? It was like being in the same room as a stranger. She barely touched me, barely looked at me. And whenever I asked if something was wrong, she'd tell me I was being needy, that she was just stressed. That's when I knew that I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. But all the signs were there, and if I was going to find out the truth, I needed to do something I never thought I'd do. That I needed to check her phone. That I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who snoops through his wife's phone. That always felt like a boundary, a line you don't cross unless you're already in a broken relationship. But what do you do when the person you love starts acting like a stranger? What do you do when your gut is screaming that something is wrong, but every time you ask, you get dismissed like you're crazy? So, I crossed the line. That I waited for my moment. Julia had been extra secretive lately, barely putting her phone down for more than a few seconds. But people get careless, no matter how hard they try to cover their tracks. And one night, she finally slipped up. She was in the shower, her phone left charging on the nightstand, screen facing up. Normally, she took it with her, but maybe she was too tired, or maybe she thought I wasn't paying attention. Either way, this was my chance. That my hands were shaking as I picked it up. The lock screen lit up. A text from Nick. Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was perfect. When's the next time? I felt my whole body go cold. That it was real. It was happening. That I swallowed hard, my vision blurring as I unlocked her phone. She had changed her password, of course. But she wasn't as smart as she thought she was. I tried the birthday of our wedding day, no luck. I tried her mom's birthday, nothing. Then, on a hunch, I tried Nick's name, and just like that, I was in. The first thing I opened was her messages. And there it was, a thread with Nick, filled with texts that made me want to throw up. I love the way you taste. Can't wait to see you again. I'll call you after he falls asleep. We need to be careful. He's starting to notice. I gripped the phone so hard I thought it would break. My breathing was shallow, my hands numb. This wasn't just flirting. This wasn't just some emotional affair. This was real. This was physical. This was betrayal at the deepest level, and it got worse. That I opened her photos. There were selfies, pictures of her in the car, at work, in our bedroom. Some innocent, some not so much. And then, there were pictures of them. One at a bar. Another in the back seat of a car. And then the one that shattered what little denial I had left, a picture of them in a hotel room, smiling. Laughing. In bed together. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That I put the phone down and walked out of the bedroom. My hands were shaking, my breath uneven. I needed air. I needed to get out before I did something reckless. That I stood outside on the balcony, staring at the city lights, trying to process what I had just seen. Everything made sense now. The distance, the late nights, the secrecy. She had been sleeping with another man while coming home to me like nothing happened. That I wasn't even sad anymore. Not in that moment. I was furious that I had given this woman everything. Years of my life. My trust, my love, my loyalty. And this is what she did? She didn't even have the decency to feel guilty, to act differently, to be careful enough to not leave evidence lying around. That's when I knew this wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't some mistake she regretted. She didn't respect me, and if she didn't respect me, I wasn't going to give her the chance to lie her way out of this, that I was going to confront her, and I wasn't going to hold back. That I stood out on the balcony for what felt like an eternity, gripping the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, my body pulsing with a rage I had never felt before. The betrayal wasn't just some careless mistake, it was calculated. Planned. Repeated, and the worst part? She wasn't even trying to hide it. Well, the way she came home late, still smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. The way she smirked at her phone, texting him while sitting right next to me. The way she'd kiss my cheek before leaving, acting like I was some fool who would never figure it out. She had no remorse, and that's what made my blood boil. That I turned back toward the bedroom. The shower was still running. I had two choices: walk in there right now and confront her while she was completely unprepared, or wait until she was dried off, comfortable, thinking she had gotten away with another night of her double life. That I chose the latter. That I sat down on the edge of the bed, gripping her phone in my hands. My heart was pounding, my entire body tense. I replayed every moment of the past few months in my head, every excuse, every little manipulation. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized she had been treating me like an idiot, like I was nothing more than a background character in her story, some clueless husband to come home to while she played around with her new toy. Not anymore. The bathroom door opened, and Julia stepped out, wrapped in a towel, her damp hair falling over her shoulders. She was looking down at her phone, probably expecting to check a new message from Nick. She froze when she saw me sitting there, holding it. Her eyes flickered with something: shock, maybe fear, but only for a second. Then, like a switch flipping, she composed herself. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone sharp, defensive, as if she were already trying to turn this around on me. That I didn't answer. I just tilted the phone toward her, the screen still open to her messages. I wanted to see her reaction. I wanted to see if she would panic, if she'd scramble for an excuse. She didn't. She sighed. Rolled her eyes. Crossed her arms. "Are you seriously going through my phone?" she scoffed, like I was the problem. Like I was the one who had done something wrong. That was when I knew for sure she wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was just angry that she got caught. "I know," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I saw everything." At first, she just stared at me. And then, without missing a beat, she did exactly what I expected her to do. She lied. "It's not what you think," she said, shaking her head, forcing out a dry laugh. "Nick is just a friend. Those pictures? They were a joke. You're reading way too much into this." I felt my jaw tighten. "A joke? You expect me to believe that? You've been sneaking around for months, lying to my face, and you want me to believe this is all just a misunderstanding?" Her expression changed again, like she was cycling through responses, trying to find the one that would work. Denial wasn't going to cut it, so she tried gaslighting. "God, you always do this," she snapped. "You're paranoid. You never trust me. Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you wouldn't be sitting here going through my phone like some jealous creep." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because it was so predictable. She had been backed into a corner, caught with undeniable proof, and instead of owning up to it, she was trying to make this my fault. "You know what's funny?" I said, leaning back. "I would have believed you. If you had just admitted it, if you had even a shred of guilt, I would have at least respected your honesty. But you're not even sorry, are you?" She glared at me, her expression twisting into something ugly. "What do you want me to say, huh? That I made a mistake? That I regret it? Fine, whatever. But maybe if you weren't so boring all the time, I wouldn't have needed to find excitement somewhere else." And there it was, the knife, twisted. She wasn't even trying to apologize. She was blaming me. My stomach clenched, my fists tightening at my sides. I had spent years of my life loving this woman, supporting her, being loyal to her. And this was her excuse? That I wasn't exciting enough? I stood up, my voice calm but firm. "You don't need to find excuses. You don't need to insult me. You cheated because you wanted to. Because you don't care about this marriage. And that's fine because now, I don't either. Her mouth opened slightly, like she hadn't expected me to be so direct. Like she thought I'd break down, beg, try to fix this. That I walked past her, grabbed my keys, and headed toward the door. Where are you going? She demanded. Away from you. And with that, I walked out. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt in control. That I wasn't going to stay and argue. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of watching me break. That I was done. That I walked out the door without looking back. I could hear Julia calling my name, her voice laced with anger and frustration, but I didn't stop. I didn't care what she had to say anymore. Nothing she could say would change what she had done. That I got in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was still pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had imagined this moment so many times. What I would say, how I would react if I ever found out she had betrayed me. And now that it was happening, it didn't feel real. That I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind racing. I had nowhere to go, no plan. I just needed to get away from her, from the house that suddenly felt like a prison. The thought of sleeping under the same roof as Julia made my skin crawl. I needed space. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot. I turned off the engine, resting my head against the seat. What now? The weight of everything started crashing down on me. The marriage I had invested years into gone. The woman I had trusted, the person I had built a life with, she didn't exist anymore. I could feel the anger, the sadness, the betrayal all mixing together in a suffocating storm. But more than anything, I felt empty. That I reached for my phone. I wasn't sure who I was going to call. Maybe a friend, maybe a family member. Someone who could tell me what the hell I was supposed to do next. But before I could decide, my screen lit up. Julia. That I stared at her name, my stomach twisting. That a part of me expected an apology, even though I knew better. Maybe a desperate plea, some attempt at damage control. But I didn't answer. I let it ring. Seconds later, a text popped up. Come home. We need to talk. I exhaled sharply. Talk? Now she wanted to talk. I ignored the message. A few minutes later, another one came through. You're blowing this out of proportion. You're being dramatic. Just come home and let's be adults about this. I laughed bitterly. Adults? Since when had she acted like an adult? Lying, sneaking around, cheating on me while coming home and pretending everything was fine? Now that I was the one walking away, she suddenly wanted to act like this was just some small disagreement we could talk through. I wasn't playing her game. That I turned off my phone, tossing it onto the passenger seat. She wasn't worth my time anymore. But as I sat there, staring at the darkened screen, a new thought crept into my mind. What if this wasn't just about me? What if Nick wasn't the only one? A sick feeling settled in my gut. The way she had acted during our fight, how easily she had shifted the blame, how little remorse she had shown. This wasn't just some one-time mistake. This was who she was. She had probably been lying to me for longer than I even realized. That I turned my phone back on, my pulse quickening. I wasn't going to respond to her, but I needed answers. That I scrolled through our shared accounts, our bank statements, our phone bills. And that's when I saw it. A second number. A pattern of charges at places I didn't recognize. Hotel stays. Expensive dinners on nights she told me she was working late. Nick wasn't the only one. Julia had been lying to me for a long time. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had wasted years of my life on a woman who had never respected me, who had probably been playing me for longer than I could even comprehend. But she had underestimated me, because now, I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to destroy her. I sat in my car, staring at the evidence in front of me. The text messages, the hotel receipts, the second number on our phone bill, it all painted a picture I couldn't ignore. Julia had been doing this for longer than I thought. She had been playing me for months, maybe even years, and the worst part? She wasn't even sorry. She didn't regret it. She didn't care that I knew. She only cared that she got caught. That was the kind of person I had married. A liar, a manipulator, a woman who thought she could do whatever she wanted and get away with it. But not this time. That I wasn't just going to walk away and let her rewrite the story, let her twist the truth to make herself the victim. She had taken everything from me, my trust, my love, my loyalty, and thrown it in my face. And now? Now, I was going to take everything from her. I wasn't the kind of guy who looked for revenge, but this wasn't just about me. This was about every single time she had looked me in the eyes and lied. Every time she had kissed me goodnight while sneaking out to be with someone else. Every time she had made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting something was wrong. That I wasn't crazy. I was right. That I started making calls. First, I reached out to our landlord. Our lease was in my name, which meant I had the power to do what I was about to do. I told them I wanted to terminate the lease immediately, that I was moving out and no longer responsible for anything to do with the apartment. When they asked why, I told them the truth. I had discovered my wife was cheating on me, and I wanted her gone. The woman on the other end sounded almost sympathetic as she told me I could officially remove myself from the lease by the end of the week. That was step one. Next, I called my bank. I had made the mistake of putting Julia on my account early in our marriage, trusting her like an idiot. That changed immediately. I removed her name, transferred all my savings to a separate account, and cancelled the credit card she had been using for her work expenses. If she wanted to keep living the life she had been living, she was going to have to do it on her own. Then, I did something that even surprised me. I called her boss. Not just the general manager, but the owner of the restaurant where she worked. It wasn't hard to get in touch with him, considering I had met him a few times at work events Julia had dragged me to. He was a straight-laced guy, serious about his business, and I had a feeling he wouldn't take too kindly to what I was about to tell him. When he picked up, I kept my voice calm, even. I explained that I had discovered my wife, one of his managers, had been sleeping with employees, specifically a bartender named Nick. I made it clear that I wasn't just some bitter husband making things up. I had proof. Screenshots. Messages. Receipts. There was a long silence on the other end before he finally said, "We'll handle it." Julia had no idea that while she was sitting at home, probably waiting for me to come crawling back, her entire world was falling apart. That I drove back to the apartment, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. I had a plan now. I had control. When I walked in, Julia was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She looked up at me, eyes narrowed. "Finally decided to come home," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I didn't answer. I just walked past her, grabbed the suitcase from the closet, and started packing my things. I could hear her getting up, following me into the bedroom. "Oh, come on, Daniel, you're really going to do this? Over some texts?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You're so dramatic." I didn't stop packing. "You need to leave," I said simply. She scoffed. "Excuse me?" "You need to leave," I repeated, zipping up the suitcase. "The lease is in my name. I already called the landlord. You have a week to figure out where you're going, but I'm not responsible for you anymore." She stared at me, her face twisting into something ugly. "You can't just kick me out," she snapped. "I can," and I did. I grabbed my phone and opened my banking app, showing her the screen. "Also, your credit card? Cancelled. Our shared account? It's mine now. You'll have to find another way to pay for your little outings." Her expression faltered. I could see the panic setting in now. But I wasn't done. "Oh, and you might want to start looking for a new job. I called your boss. Told him everything. You and Nick." I tilted my head. "Wonder how that's going to play out." She turned pale. "You didn't." I did. And just like that, the power shifted. For the first time since this nightmare started, I was the one in control. Julia stood there, speechless, the realization sinking in. She had spent months thinking she was untouchable, that she could do whatever she wanted and I would just take it. But now? Now she had to deal with the consequences that I didn't wait for her response. I grabbed my suitcase, walked past her, and headed for the door. "Good luck, Julia," I said, my voice calm, even. And then I walked out, leaving her standing in the wreckage of her own choices. As I stepped outside, breathing in the night air, I realized something. I wasn't broken. I wasn't destroyed. I was free. And Julia? She was nothing more than a chapter in my past, one I would never reread. I didn't look back as I walked out of that apartment. I didn't need to. I could already picture Julia standing there, her mouth open, her brain scrambling to come up with a way to spin this back on me. She wasn't used to losing. She wasn't used to consequences. And now that they were hitting her all at once, she was drowning. I got into my car and drove. I didn't even know where I was going, just somewhere that wasn't there. Somewhere that didn't smell like her perfume, didn't remind me of the years I wasted believing she was someone she wasn't. My phone was buzzing, but I ignored it. I already knew what the messages would say. Julia had spent months lying to my face, sneaking around, laughing behind my back with another man. And yet, now that she had lost control, she was probably in full damage control mode. There were only two ways this could go: either she'd try to twist this into me being the bad guy, or she'd pretend to be the victim. Maybe both. I wasn't going to let her do either. After driving aimlessly for an hour, I ended up at my friend Mark's place. Mark had been my best friend since college, the kind of guy who would have my back no matter what. He opened the door, took one look at me, and didn't even ask. He just stepped aside and said, "Come in." I crashed on his couch, barely able to process everything. I told him everything: how I found out, what I did, how Julia reacted. He just shook his head. "Man, I never liked her," he admitted. I didn't want to say anything before, but there was always something about her. Like she always had one foot out the door. Hearing it from someone else made my chest tighten. Had I been blind this whole time? Were the signs always there, and I was just too in love or too stupid to see them? I didn't sleep much that night. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't shut off. Everything I had built with Julia was gone. Everything I thought we were a lie. And now? Now I had to figure out how to move forward. By morning, I had over a dozen missed calls from her. I hesitated for a second, then opened her messages. "Danny, please, let's talk. You're overreacting. I didn't mean for it to happen. You're really going to throw away everything over one mistake? Answer me." There it was, the cycle in full force. Excuses. Gaslighting. Blame shifting. I wasn't going to play her game. I blocked her number. That should have been the end of it. But Julia wasn't done yet. By the afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I ignored it. Then another. Then another. Eventually, I answered, just to make it stop. It was Nick. At first, I didn't say anything. I just let the silence stretch, waiting for him to speak first. "Man, listen," he started, his voice tense. "You didn't have to do all that." I nearly laughed. "Didn't have to do all that?" I clenched my jaw. "You mean exposing the fact that you were screwing a married woman? That, all that?" He sighed. "Look, I didn't want things to go this way. It just happened. Julia, she was unhappy, okay? You weren't giving her what she needed. And there it was. The final insult. It wasn't Julia's fault. It wasn't Nick's fault. It was mine. That's what cheaters do. They rewrite reality. They justify their actions in whatever way makes them feel better. I didn't need to hear any more. "Don't ever call me again," I said, my voice cold, controlled. And then I hung up, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Julia wasn't going to let go that easily, and I wasn't about to let her rewrite the ending of this story. Walking away from Julia should have been the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it wasn't. The moment I stepped out of that apartment, I felt something I hadn't in months: clarity. It was like I had been suffocating for so long, drowning in suspicion, anger, and heartbreak, and suddenly, I could breathe again. That I drove with no real destination, just needing to get away. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel guilt. All I felt was relief that I was done wasting my energy on a woman who had never valued me in the first place. The thought of all the lies she had told, all the nights she had come home to me after being with someone else, made my stomach turn. But at the same time, I knew I had done everything right. I had exposed her. I had taken back control. That I stayed at a hotel that night, though sleep didn't come easily. My mind kept replaying everything: her reaction, the way she had gone from defensive to furious to panicked in a matter of minutes. She wasn't upset that I was leaving. She wasn't even upset that I knew about the affair. She was upset that her perfect little game was falling apart. That she was losing her safety net. The next morning, I checked my phone. Multiple missed calls from her. A handful of texts that started with fake concern: "I'm worried about you. Just come back and we'll talk," and quickly shifted into anger: "You're ruining everything. You're being petty." Then finally, desperation: "Please, can we just fix this?" I didn't answer any of them. There was nothing left to fix. Instead, I made arrangements to move forward. I contacted a lawyer to begin the divorce process. I wasn't going to drag this out, wasn't going to give her the opportunity to manipulate or delay things. Everything was in my favor. I had the lease under my name, I had the financial upper hand, and now, I had the proof of her infidelity. I wanted this done quickly. Cleanly. I wanted her out of my life. By the time I finally drove back to the apartment to gather the rest of my things, Julia was gone. I had given her a deadline to leave, but it seemed she had decided to go earlier. Whether it was to save face or because she had another place to stay, I didn't care. The apartment was empty, her belongings cleared out except for a few things she had left behind, things I had no intention of keeping. There was a strange silence in the space. No lingering tension, no noise of her phone buzzing or the sound of her moving around the kitchen like she used to. Just stillness. A reminder that I was free. That I packed up the last of my things, making sure there was nothing left tying me to this place. Before leaving, I took one last look around, knowing it would be the last time I ever stepped foot in that apartment. This wasn't just the end of my relationship. It was the end of a version of myself I had let Julia manipulate and control for too long. I had spent months feeling like a fool, questioning myself, trying to rationalize her lies. But now, I was done doubting myself. That I locked the door behind me and didn't look back. In the end, the truth came crashing down like a tidal wave, sweeping away everything in its path. The deception, carefully hidden behind smiles, kind words, and subtle excuses, finally surfaced. What had started as a distant suspicion in the back of the mind of the betrayed partner grew into undeniable evidence. Each day, more fragments of the truth fell into place, like pieces of a shattered mirror. The lies, the late nights, the unexplained absences, it all added up. The affair had not been a one-time mistake. It had been an ongoing betrayal, stretching over months. The partner who had been completely unaware now realized how deep the deceit ran. The shock, the disbelief, the anger, it all mixed together into a whirlwind of emotions that were almost impossible to navigate. The partner had trusted so completely, had invested so much into the relationship, that the revelation felt like a personal attack, a violation of everything they had believed. In the days following the discovery, the betrayed partner felt lost. There were arguments, desperate attempts to understand, to piece together the reasons, to find some explanation for why it happened. But answers were scarce. The partner who had cheated was defensive, unwilling to take full responsibility, often blaming circumstances or claiming it was a momentary lapse in judgment. But no amount of justification could erase the hurt, the raw pain of betrayal that now lingered in every word, every gesture. Trust, once the foundation of their life together, had now turned to dust. Every time they looked at each other, the weight of the affair hung between them like an invisible wall. The love that had once been so strong now felt fragile, broken, beyond repair. The relationship had been built on shared experiences, dreams for the future, and promises that now felt empty. After long nights of tears, endless questioning, and sleepless hours spent trying to make sense of it all, the decision became clear. There was no going back. The betrayal was not just the act of cheating itself, but the lies that had been told, the manipulations that had occurred, and the emotional distance that had been built over time. The once shared connection was now irreparably damaged. It was time to walk away. The decision to end the relationship didn't come easily, but it became increasingly apparent that staying would only prolong the suffering. The partner who had been cheated on had no choice but to face the painful truth: the person they had loved had betrayed them in the most intimate way possible. There would be no rebuilding, no second chances, no more hoping for change. The relationship, no matter how much history they shared, was over. The healing process would take time, perhaps a long time. But the betrayed partner began to understand that self-respect and the ability to move forward were more important than clinging to a relationship that had become toxic. They would rebuild their life, piece by piece, day by day. Though the scars would remain, they would eventually fade, and new experiences, new relationships, would take root. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape, free from the chains of betrayal.